Every morning at Sterling Corporate Center, while most executives sipped lattes and scrolled through emails, Maria Reyes was already at work. By 6:30 a.m., she'd have cleaned every executive bathroom on the 32nd floor, her movements methodical and thorough. The janitor's cart was her constant companion, but none of the suited professionals passing by realized they were brushing shoulders with one of the FBI's most skilled surveillance operatives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ritual meant something to her, maintaining her cover with the same precision she applied to her actual mission. The corporate executives barely noticed her. To them, she was just the cleaning lady who emptied their trash, scrubbed their toilets, and made sure their workspace remained spotless. Director Richard Bailey, the head of financial operations, treated her like furniture that occasionally needed to be moved aside. Rodriguez, make sure the executive bathrooms are spotless before the board meeting. Bailey would bark, never bothering to look at her directly. And don't touch anything on my desk. That's confidential material. Maria would nod silently, taking her cleaning supplies to the restrooms. She'd wipe down each sink with the same care a surgeon might show prepping an operating room. Her hands moved with practiced familiarity, checking every stall, every fixture, every hidden corner. The executives who occasionally noticed her assumed it was just thoroughness. They had no idea she was mentally mapping every conversation, every suspicious interaction, every whispered meeting that could connect to the massive fraud case she was investigating. During lunch breaks, while others gathered in the sleek cafeteria discussing weekend plans, Maria sat alone in the maintenance room eating a sandwich or stared out at the city skyline that reminded her of her hometown. She'd grown up in Baltimore, where her mother, a single parent who cleaned houses for a living, had taught her that being invisible sometimes meant seeing everything. "Hey, toilet girl," called out Bradley Morrison, a cocky 28-year-old junior executive from Boston who'd barely earned his MBA. "You missed a spot in my private bathroom. There's still water spots on the mirror." His colleagues laughed. Maria looked up from the cleaning schedule she was reviewing, offered a small smile, and made a note on her clipboard. Let them think what they wanted. Her handler at the bureau had always told her the best cover was one people were too arrogant to question. The truth was Maria Reyes had been handling complex surveillance operations since she was recruited from Quantico 7 years ago. Every cleaning session was an opportunity to plant, check, or relocate the listening devices that had been gathering evidence for the past 6 months. But Sterling Corporate didn't care about impressive FBI credentials or covert operation experience. They cared about maintaining appearances, keeping their workspace immaculate for visiting clients, and making sure the help remained properly invisible. So she accepted the role they assumed for her: invisible support staff who maintained their bathrooms while they conducted their business. The irony wasn't lost on her. She watched them discuss confidential deals in what they thought was complete privacy, some speaking freely about their creative accounting and regulatory workarounds right in front of her. They never suspected that the woman scrubbing the toilet was recording every incriminating word. Bailey seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding her of her place. "You're not authorized to be in the conference rooms during meetings, Rodriguez. Your job is maintenance, not mingling with the executives. Leave the business discussions to people who actually understand finance." What Bailey didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maria's quiet demeanor wasn't from subservience. It was from discipline. Her FBI training had taught her that true operatives didn't announce their presence. They simply performed when performance mattered. And deep down, Maria suspected that day was coming soon. The rumors started 3 weeks later, spreading through the executive suites like wildfire. Word was that the SEC had launched a preliminary investigation into Sterling's accounting practices. Bradley Morrison, who seemed to make it his personal mission to ensure everyone knew about the latest office gossip, was more than happy to share the details. "Just a fishing expedition," he announced during a catered lunch, loud enough for half the dining area to hear. "Bailey says they don't have anything concrete. Just responding to some anonymous tip that'll go nowhere." The story grew with each telling. By the time it reached the marketing department, the SEC was supposedly backing down after Bailey's legal team had shut them down. By evening, the narrative was that the whole investigation had been a misunderstanding. The story was always the same. Sterling was untouchable. The regulators were incompetent, and business would continue as usual. Bailey did nothing to discourage the confidence. If anything, he seemed to enjoy it. "Rodriguez is good at one thing," he'd tell anyone who'd listen. "Making toilets sparkle. But understanding the complexities of international finance? That's a different skill set entirely." What none of them noticed was how Maria reacted when she overheard their panicked private conversations. Every time an executive mentioned shredding those documents or wiping the servers, her jaw would tighten almost imperceptibly. When they discussed which accounts to hide from investigators, she'd frown slightly, like someone watching a criminal use the wrong alibi for a simple question. Emily Patterson, an administrative assistant with a degree in finance who'd been repeatedly passed over for promotion, was one of the few who paid attention. A first-generation college graduate from Nevada, she'd learned early to notice things others missed. She recognized something in the way Maria carried herself that didn't fit the narrative. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You know something about what's happening, don't you?" Emily said one afternoon, finding Maria checking supplies in the maintenance closet. It wasn't a question. Maria looked up, meeting her eyes for a moment before returning to her inventory. "I know how to clean bathrooms." "That's not what I meant." Emily pulled the door slightly closed. "Yesterday when Morrison was bragging about how they'd hidden those Cayman transfers, you shook your head before he even finished speaking. You knew he was digging himself deeper." "Lucky guess." "No," Emily said firmly. "You were recording him. I saw you adjust something under your uniform when Bailey walked in. My cousin works for the Justice Department. I know what an undercover operation looks like." Maria's hand stilled on the supply checklist. For just a moment, her careful mask slipped, and Emily caught a glimpse of something deeper. Intelligence. Purpose, maybe even concern. "Your cousin sounds like an interesting person," Maria said finally. That evening, Emily's curiosity got the better of her. She had access to personnel records through her administrative role, and something about Maria Rodriguez didn't add up. The woman was too observant, too precise, too comfortable moving through the building's restricted areas to be just a cleaning person. The file was mostly standard information, employment history, background check, maintenance certifications, but missing the kind of personal details that most employee files contained. No emergency contact, no previous employment references. Just a start date 6 months ago, coinciding perfectly with when the first rumors of financial irregularities had begun circulating. Before she could dig deeper, her computer screen suddenly locked her out, but the seed was planted. Maria Rodriguez wasn't who she appeared to be, and Emily had a feeling that everyone at Sterling Corporate was about to find out exactly who they'd been underestimating. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Sterling Corporate was hosting a major investor meeting, and there would be a full presentation of their financial practices that had half the accounting department nervous and excited. None of them suspected that the quiet woman cleaning their restrooms was about to turn their world upside down. But Emily was beginning to understand that sometimes the most dangerous people were the ones nobody saw coming. The announcement came during the morning executive briefing, delivered by CEO James Harrison himself. Attention everyone. We have the honor of hosting our largest potential investors tomorrow for a complete financial transparency presentation. This is an opportunity to showcase the exceptional innovation and stability of Sterling's accounting practices. A buzz of excitement rippled through the gathered employees. These investors represented billions in potential capital, the kind of deal that would cement Sterling's position as a market leader and potentially double their stock price. For most of them, this would be a career-making opportunity. Director Bailey practically glowed with anticipation. This was his show, his moment to shine in front of the financial elite. He spent the rest of the day making preparations, selecting his best slides and ensuring everything would be perfect. "Rodriguez," he barked as Maria wiped down the conference room windows, "I want every bathroom spotless tomorrow. And stay out of the main conference room during the presentation. This is for qualified personnel only, understood?" But Bailey wasn't finished. Over the next few hours, his casual dismissiveness evolved into something more pointed, more cruel. Maybe it was the pressure of the upcoming presentation. Or maybe he'd simply decided that having maintenance staff visible during such an important meeting was an embarrassment he couldn't tolerate. "You know what, Rodriguez?" he said, loud enough for everyone in the break room to hear. "Maybe you should just take tomorrow off. I don't want our distinguished visitors seeing someone who cleans toilets for a living. It might reflect poorly on the company's image." The room went quiet. This wasn't just casual condescension anymore. Bailey was publicly humiliating her. Several employees looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. The corporate hierarchy was sacred, and challenging a director wasn't something associates and assistants did lightly. Maria's hands never stopped wiping down the counter. But Emily noticed her knuckles had gone white around the cleaning cloth. "Actually," Bailey continued, warming to his theme, "I'm thinking we need to have a conversation with HR about your continued employment in this section. Someone from your background probably shouldn't be maintaining areas where sensitive financial discussions take place." Now he'd crossed a line, threatening her job, her livelihood, her ability to complete whatever mission she was really there for. That was more than casual harassment. That was destroying someone's cover out of petty cruelty. Maria set down her cleaning supplies and looked up at Bailey for the first time in weeks. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made several people in the room shift uncomfortably. "Director Bailey, I'll be here tomorrow as assigned. Maintaining cleanliness is my assigned duty, and I take my duties seriously." "Your duties," Bailey sneered, "are whatever I say they are. And tomorrow your duty is to stay invisible and let real professionals do real work." That night, Maria sat alone in her modest apartment, staring at a framed photo of her mother at her FBI Academy graduation. She thought about how proud her mother had been, seeing her daughter rise from the daughter of a house cleaner to a federal agent. Her mother had taught her that some battles chose you, whether you wanted them or not. She'd also taught her that when those battles came, you fought them with honor, precision, and absolute commitment. She opened her laptop and connected to a secure server, reviewing the evidence collected over the past 6 months. The listening devices planted throughout Sterling Corporate, in light fixtures, bathroom vents, even the underside of conference tables, had captured hundreds of hours of incriminating conversations. Tomorrow, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit would be watching everything, disguised as potential investors. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent months being invisible, accepting disrespect, tolerating humiliation. But tomorrow was different. Tomorrow, she had a feeling her country needed her to be more than just a cleaning lady. Her FBI trainer's voice echoed in her memory. "Real agents don't announce their presence, Maria. They just perform when performance matters." Tomorrow, performance would matter. And Director Bailey was about to learn that some people's silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. The morning of the investor presentation dawned clear and bright. Perfect conditions for the sting operation, years in the making. Maria arrived at Sterling Corporate before anyone else, as usual. But today she carried something extra alongside her cleaning cart, a small communication device hidden in her uniform pocket. By 9 a.m., Sterling's best-dressed executives had assembled. The presentation would be elite. Director Bailey, Senior VP Thompson, who'd closed 3 major deals last quarter, Financial Officer Rodriguez, fresh from negotiating European partnerships, and Chief Legal Counsel Winters, who'd kept regulators at bay for years. These were professionals whose entire careers revolved around making money and hiding how they did it. Bailey strutted around like a peacock, inspecting the conference room and barking orders. Remember, everyone, we're representing the entire company today. I expect nothing less than perfection. At 9:57 a.m., a group of impeccably dressed individuals arrived at the reception area. Special Agent in Charge Diana Reynolds stepped out first, disguised as the lead investor, with 5 other agents posing as her team. They were smaller than Bailey had expected, less imposing than the financial sharks he'd anticipated, but their subtle confidence was unmistakable. What struck Maria most was Reynolds' eyes. They swept across the assembled executives with professional assessment, then landed on her for just a moment. For anyone watching, it appeared to be nothing more than a casual glance at the cleaning staff. But Maria caught the imperceptible nod, the signal that everything was in place. "Welcome to Sterling Corporate," Bailey said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of successful deception. "We're honored to open our books completely to such distinguished investors. Please follow me to the main conference room." The presentation began. One by one, Sterling's finest took their positions at the podium and attempted to dazzle the investors with their financial prowess. The numbers were impressive by most standards: double-digit growth, expanding international presence, innovative investment structures that promised exceptional returns while minimizing tax burden. Each slide brought a tighter smile to Reynolds' face. This wasn't just a presentation. It was a confession, delivered by people who had no idea. They were providing the final pieces of evidence needed for their own indictment. Bailey was sweating, despite the cool air conditioning, as he reached the climax of his presentation. "And as you can see from these projections, our proprietary investment structure allows for completely legal optimization of regulatory requirements." Reynolds interrupted gently. "These are exceptionally impressive numbers, Director Bailey. Would you mind walking us through exactly how you achieve these returns while maintaining such low tax liability?" The question was polite but devastating. Bailey's face flushed slightly as he launched into an explanation that carefully danced around the illegal activities at the heart of their operation. That's when Reynolds looked directly at Maria for the first time. "Excuse me, but would you mind adjusting the temperature? It's a bit warm in here." Every head in the conference room turned to stare at Maria. Bailey looked like he might have a stroke. "Sir, she's just maintenance staff. She doesn't have access to." I asked her. Reynolds' tone was still mild, but it carried the weight of authority that made Bailey shut his mouth immediately. Maria stood slowly, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Of course. While I'm adjusting the thermostat, would you like me to activate the full recording system that's been documenting every conversation in this building for the past 6 months?" A murmur ran through the assembled executives. This was technical language they never expected from the cleaning lady. Bailey looked like he'd been slapped. Reynolds nodded slowly. "Yes, I think that would be appropriate at this time." The suggestion hit the room like a thunderbolt. Bailey started to sputter an objection, but Reynolds' raised hand silenced him immediately. Maria felt every eye in the room boring into her. This was the moment her training had prepared her for, without any of them knowing it. The moment when quiet competence would be tested against loud arrogance. "I'd be honored, ma'am," she said calmly. Maria walked to her cleaning cart with the deliberate calm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. As she opened a hidden compartment, revealing sophisticated surveillance equipment with FBI logos, a hush fell over the room. This wasn't standard janitorial equipment. This was precision intelligence gathering technology, clearly government issued, clearly maintained by someone who understood exactly what they were doing. "I'll be damned," whispered Thompson. Bailey found his voice. "This is outrageous. She's been planted here illegally. Whatever you think you've recorded won't be admissible, Director Bailey." Reynolds' voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "I have a federal warrant authorizing this entire operation. Stand down." Maria tapped a few commands into the device, and suddenly the room's speakers came to life with Bailey's own voice from 3 weeks earlier. "Make sure those Cayman accounts stay completely isolated from the main books. If the SEC ever got wind of how we're structuring these, we'd all be looking at federal charges." The recording continued, damning conversation after damning conversation. Bailey's face drained of all color as his own words condemned him and his entire executive team. "My God," someone whispered. "She heard everything." Reynolds stood up from her chair, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Special Agent Diana Reynolds of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This meeting is now officially a federal investigation into securities fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering." That evening, as Maria packed up her small apartment, she reflected on the day's events. The cover identity of Maria Rodriguez, maintenance worker, was being systematically dismantled. The modest furnishings, the simple clothes, the cleaning manuals on the bookshelf, all would be replaced as she returned to her real life as Special Agent Reyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to serve. But tonight, she was content knowing that sometimes the most important battles were won not with weapons, but with quiet dignity and the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be. 3 weeks later, Maria found herself at the FBI Academy in Quantico, walking through the halls of the Undercover Operations Training Facility. The building hummed with quiet intensity. This was where the Bureau's most elite undercover agents came to learn the delicate art of becoming someone else while remaining true to their oath. Director Marcus Wallace greeted her personally, a compact man with intelligent eyes and calloused hands that spoke of decades in the field before moving to administration. He had read her complete file, including the psychological evaluations conducted after each of her deep cover operations. "Agent Reyes," he said, using her real name with a warmth that acknowledged her return to her true identity. "I'll be honest with you. When Agent Reynolds recommended you for this position, I was skeptical. Teaching undercover methodology isn't just about being able to maintain a cover. It's about understanding how to transfer complex skills to agents who may never have your natural ability to blend in." They walked through the facility, past simulation rooms where trainees practiced various scenarios, through mock apartments, identical to those an agent might occupy during a long-term assignment. Through soundproof glass, Maria watched instructors working with small groups, demonstrating techniques that she recognized from her own training and field experience. "Your assignment," Wallace continued, "will be developing curriculum for what we're calling the Invisible Observer Program. Too many of our undercover operatives have excellent technical skills, but lack the psychological preparation for long-term immersion. Based on your field record and your unique approach to maintaining cover, we think you might have insights that could benefit the entire program." Maria paused at a window overlooking a classroom where trainees were practicing different personas. She could see immediately what they were doing wrong, overacting their parts, drawing attention rather than deflecting it, focusing on the dramatic aspects of their cover rather than the mundane details that made a persona believable. "Permission to ask a question, sir?" "Of course." Are we training them to be better pretenders or better observers? Wallace stopped walking. The question cut to the heart of something he'd been wrestling with throughout his career. What's the difference? A pretender focuses on their own performance. An observer focuses on how others perceive them and adjusts accordingly. The difference is everything. For the first time since they'd met, Wallace smiled genuinely. Agent Reynolds said you'd have a unique perspective. I think she underestimated it. Over the following weeks, Maria threw herself into her new role. With the same quiet intensity she brought to undercover work. But now, instead of cleaning bathrooms, she was developing training protocols that emphasize psychological resilience alongside technical skills. Her first class consisted of 12 agents, all experienced in fieldwork but new to long-term undercover operations. Special Agent Jennifer Collins, recently returned from a 6-month assignment infiltrating a money laundering operation, looked skeptical as Maria introduced herself. I'm not here to teach you how to lie, Maria began. You already know how to lie. I'm here to teach you how to disappear in plain sight. She led them through exercises that had nothing to do with false identities or cover stories, reading rooms for power dynamics, calculating the psychological profiles of targets based on limited interactions, understanding when to be noticed, and when invisibility was the right tool for the mission. Every role has consequences beyond the immediate assignment, she explained during one session. In undercover work, you're not just playing a part. You're creating relationships that affect real people. The technical skill is meaningless without the wisdom to use it appropriately. Special Agent Collins approached her after the 3rd day of training. Ma'am, this isn't like any undercover course I've ever taken. Good. How do you feel about that? Honestly, it's harder than I expected. You're making us think about things that most instructors never mention, like yesterday, when you asked us to describe the difference between maintaining cover and becoming the cover. I've been thinking about that for 18 hours, Maria nodded. That's the point. Anyone can learn to pretend to be someone else for a few hours. But knowing when that pretense becomes dangerous to your core identity, that's what separates good agents from exceptional ones. Word of her unconventional teaching methods spread quickly through the bureau. Other instructors began requesting copies of her curriculum. Senior officials who'd heard about the psychological infiltrator started attending her sessions as observers. But the real validation came from her students. Agents who completed her program didn't just maintain their covers more effectively, they made better decisions under pressure. They understood their role in the larger mission. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence that came from knowing they were prepared for the psychological toll that deep cover operations demanded. Late one evening, as Maria reviewed performance reports from her latest class, she found a handwritten note that had been slipped under her office door. Agent Reyes, my father always said that the best teachers are the ones who change how you think, not just what you know. Thank you for helping me understand that being undercover isn't about being someone else. It's about finding the parts of yourself that connect with your cover identity. I now understand why I struggled on my last assignment. Special Agent Emily Patterson. Maria smiled, recognizing the name. Emily had transferred to Quantico specifically to take her course, having been inspired by witnessing Maria's work at Sterling Corporate. As she turned off her office lights and headed to her new apartment, a real home now, filled with personal touches that reflected her true identity rather than a cover, Maria reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. From her childhood watching her mother clean houses through her recruitment to the FBI and her years of undercover work to now shaping the next generation of undercover operatives. Each phase had taught her something different about service, about sacrifice, about the responsibility that came with the power to move unnoticed through the world. But perhaps the most important lesson was one her mother had taught her years ago. True strength wasn't about how much attention you could Attract, but about knowing when invisibility was your greatest power. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities to serve. But tonight, she was content knowing that her mother's lessons lived on in every agent she trained, and that sometimes the most important operations were the ones where no one ever knew you were there. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be ready when called upon. 6 months into her assignment at Quantico, Maria received an unexpected visitor. She was reviewing training scenarios in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Ma'am, there's a Director Wallace here to see you." Director Wallace entered with the same quiet authority she remembered from their first meeting, but now his face carried a smile of genuine pride. "Agent Reyes, I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I was reviewing program metrics and wanted to discuss your results in person." They walked through the training facility together, observing classes in session. In one room, trainees were practicing what Maria called invisible integration exercises that required them to blend into various social environments where they might not naturally belong. "Your program has generated quite a bit of discussion in Washington circles," Wallace observed. "Initial reports suggest that agents completing your training show 40% better psychological resilience during deep cover operations compared to traditional undercover programs." Maria watched through the observation window as one of her students, faced with a complex scenario, chose to maintain their peripheral position rather than attempt to force connections with the target group. Exactly the kind of patient, strategic thinking she'd been trying to instill. "Sir, I've been thinking about something you said when I first arrived, about the difference between pretending and observing." "Go on." "I think I spent years believing that my value as an agent was tied to my ability to deceive effectively. But what I'm learning here is that my real value might be in teaching others to see clearly before they attempt to be seen a certain way." Wallace nodded slowly. "The Sterling operation was necessary, Maria. What you did exposed serious financial crimes. But you're right. Teaching agents to make better psychological assessments might prevent the kind of abuse you endured during that operation." They paused outside a classroom where Agent Collins was leading a discussion about maintaining core identity during long-term assignments. The conversation was complex, nuanced, exactly the kind of thinking that separated professional undercover agents from those who lost themselves in their covers. "There's something else," Wallace continued. "The Bureau is considering expanding your program bureau-wide. They want to integrate psychological resilience and identity preservation into all undercover training." The implications hit Maria immediately. Her mother's lessons, learned while watching her clean houses for the wealthy who never truly saw her, refined through undercover operations and tempered by the wisdom that came from understanding the true cost of invisibility, would become part of how America trained its most secretive operatives. "Sir, that's an incredible responsibility." "Yes, it is. But you've already proven you can handle incredible responsibilities. The question is whether you're ready to step into a larger role. We're talking about a promotion to unit chief and assignment to head a new department, psychological resilience and undercover methodology." That evening, Maria sat in her apartment, looking at the framed photo of her mother that had traveled with her from assignment to assignment. Her mother had died 2 years before the Sterling operation, proud of her daughter but worried about the weight she carried from years of being someone else. Now she wondered what her mother would think about this new opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Emily Patterson. "Just heard about the program expansion. Your training saved my sanity during my last assignment. You're changing how we think about being undercover." More messages followed. Agents from her classes sharing stories about how her teaching had influenced their field operations. Supervisors reporting improved performance and better psychological outcomes from personnel who'd completed her program. Even international partners expressing interest in her curriculum. The cleaning lady's daughter had found her true calling, and it wasn't in pretending to be someone else. It was in teaching others to remain themselves while navigating the complex world of assumed identities. The next morning, Maria found herself back in the simulation room where she'd first demonstrated her abilities months earlier. But instead of playing a role, she stood behind a group of young agents, teaching them to read subtle social cues, understand power dynamics, and most importantly, understand themselves. Remember, she told them, invisibility isn't just about not being seen. It's about choosing when and how you're perceived. Your power in undercover work comes not from becoming someone else entirely, but from finding the authentic parts of yourself that can connect with your cover identity. A young agent raised her hand. "Ma'am, how do you maintain your sense of self when you've been someone else for months?" Maria smiled, hearing her mother's voice in the question. "You prepare beforehand by establishing core values and identity anchors that remain unchanged regardless of your cover. When the pressure hits, you don't become someone else completely. You expand yourself to include the role while protecting your core identity." As the class continued, Maria noticed movement at the edge of the room. Director Bailey, now in prison attire and handcuffs, was being escorted through the facility as part of a training exercise on financial crimes. When their eyes met, his widened in recognition before quickly looking away. He'd been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, his empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed. The man who had once mocked the cleaning lady was now himself. An example used in FBI training, a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating those deemed invisible. When the training session ended, one of the senior instructors approached her. "Agent Reyes, I've been teaching undercover ops for 15 years. What you're doing here is revolutionary. You're not just teaching technique, you're addressing the psychological toll that deep cover takes on our people." "We all make sacrifices in this work," Maria replied. "The question is how to make those sacrifices sustainable without losing ourselves in the process." The conversation reminded Maria of something her mother had often said: influence spreads in ways you never expect. The lessons she'd learned scrubbing toilets at Sterling Corporate while gathering evidence were now shaping agents across the bureau, creating ripples that would extend far beyond anything she could directly observe. As the sun set over Quantico, Maria made her decision about the promotion and expanded role. She would accept, not because she craved recognition or authority, but because the Bureau needed agents who understood that true strength came from authenticity, resilience, and the courage to maintain one's core identity even while pretending to be someone else. That night, she wrote a letter to her mother, as she did every year on the anniversary of her death. "Mom, remember how you used to say that? Being invisible didn't mean being powerless. I finally understand what you meant. Teaching agents to maintain their authentic selves while navigating deception, that might be the most important lesson of all. The household lessons you taught me aren't just living on in me anymore. They're living on in every agent I train. And they'll live on in everyone those agents influence in turn. Your legacy isn't just in the cases I closed or the criminals I helped convict. It's in all the agents who won't lose themselves because they learn to balance deception with authenticity." I think you'd be proud of that. 6 months later, when the FBI officially announced the new Department of Psychological Resilience and Undercover Methodology, the press release included a quote from its director, Unit Chief Maria Reyes: "Our goal isn't to create better liars. It's to create better agents, agents who understand that true undercover work extends far beyond deception. It includes resilience in identity, precision in observation, and wisdom in knowing when invisibility is power and when authenticity is stronger." The quiet woman who had once been dismissed as just the cleaning lady had become one of the most influential trainers in the modern FBI, but she still began each day the same way she had at Sterling Corporate, with a moment of quiet reflection, honoring the woman who had taught her that being unseen didn't mean being without power. Some heroes charge into danger with badges displayed. Others move quietly through the shadows, cleaning bathrooms and planting listening devices. Both kinds of heroes serve with honor. Both kinds of heroes make their country proud. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, both kinds of heroes get to see the lasting impact of lessons learned from a single mother who understood that true strength always comes from within. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be ready when called upon. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Maria's new office at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. The space was larger than she'd ever had before, with a view overlooking the capital city she'd sworn to protect. On her desk sat a framed photo of her mother alongside her unit chief credentials, a visual reminder of how far she'd come from the daughter of a house cleaner to leading the Bureau's newest and most innovative division. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Assistant Director Pearson, a tall woman with steel gray hair and 40 years of Bureau experience, entered with a file folder. "Good morning, Unit Chief Reyes. Are you settling in all right?" Maria nodded, still adjusting to her new title. "Yes, ma'am. Just finalizing the curriculum for the expanded program." "That's actually why I'm here." Pearson placed the folder on her desk. "The director has authorized an unprecedented expansion of your methodology. We're not just implementing it for undercover operations anymore. We're extending it to all field agents." Maria opened the folder to find authorization documents for what was being called Project Perspective, a complete overhaul of how the FBI approached psychological resilience across all divisions. "This is extensive," Maria said, scanning the documents. The Sterling corporate case changed things. Reyes, not just the financial crimes we uncovered, but how you operated within that hostile environment without breaking cover or losing yourself. The director believes your approach has applications far beyond undercover work. Pearson leaned forward, her expression serious. "We lose too many good agents to psychological burnout. They either leave the Bureau or worse, stay and become shells of themselves. Your methods of maintaining core identity while navigating difficult circumstances could revolutionize how we prepare agents for the psychological toll of this work." The implications were staggering. What had begun as specialized training for undercover operatives would now potentially shape the psychological preparation of thousands of agents across dozens of specialties. "There's more," Pearson continued. "The Treasury Department, Homeland Security, and even the CIA have expressed interest in your methodology. They're sending representatives next month to observe your training program." Maria felt a weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "With all due respect, ma'am, this is moving very quickly. I designed this curriculum specifically for undercover operations. I'm not sure it translates directly to other contexts." Pearson smiled. "That's exactly why we need you, Reyes. You understand the limitations as well as the potential. I'm not asking you to simply scale up what you've already created. I'm asking you to evolve it." After Pearson left, Maria sat quietly, contemplating how her life had changed in the year since Sterling Corporate. She'd gone from scrubbing toilets while being mocked by executives to potentially reshaping how federal agents across multiple agencies approached psychological resilience. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emily Patterson, now one of her senior instructors. "Meeting with Treasury reps today. They're excited but skeptical. Could use your perspective on translating our methods to their context." Maria smiled. Emily had become not just a colleague, but a friend, one of the few people who had seen her both as the invisible cleaning lady and as the capable agent she truly was. The next morning found Maria observing a training session through one-way glass. 20 agents from various FBI divisions sat in a circle, engaged in what she called identity anchoring, a technique for establishing psychological touchpoints that remained consistent regardless of circumstances. Special Agent Derek Hernandez, a veteran field agent with 15 years' experience, was sharing his struggle with compartmentalizing traumatic cases. "I've always prided myself on being able to leave work at work," he explained. "But after the Riverside child trafficking case, I couldn't switch off. I'd see my own kids and immediately think about the victims. I started building walls between myself and my family without realizing it." Maria watched as Emily guided the discussion with quiet skill. That compartmentalization is a survival mechanism, but it can become a prison. What if instead of walls we build bridges between your work identity and your home identity? The concept was central to Maria's methodology, not separating different aspects of oneself, but integrating them in healthy ways, finding the authentic core that remained constant across contexts. After the session, Emily found Maria in her office. "The Treasury agents are here. They've been reviewing our materials and have questions about implementation." Maria took a deep breath, preparing to defend her methods to yet another skeptical audience. But as she entered the conference room, she was surprised to find not just the expected Treasury representatives, but Director Marcus Wallace as well. "Unit Chief Reyes," Wallace greeted her with a warm handshake. "I hope you don't mind my joining this meeting. The Treasury Department's interest in your program has caught attention at the highest levels." The Treasury team was led by Senior Agent Victoria Summers, a formidable woman with a reputation for transforming stagnant departments into high-functioning units. "Chief Reyes," Summers began without preamble, "I've reviewed your curriculum extensively. Your approach to psychological resilience is unlike anything I've seen in 25 years of service." Maria prepared for criticism, but Summers surprised her. "We want to implement it immediately. Treasury agents face unique pressures, infiltrating financial institutions, navigating complex fraud cases that span years, maintaining professional relationships with targets who may become informants. Your methodology addresses challenges we've struggled with for decades." The meeting evolved into a collaborative session, with Maria explaining the core principles while Summers and her team offered insights into Treasury-specific applications. Wallace observed with quiet approval, occasionally asking questions that bridged the gap between theory and implementation. As the meeting concluded, Summers handed Maria her card. "We'll need your direct involvement in adapting this for our people. Are you available for consultation?" Before Maria could respond, Wallace interjected. "Actually, we're organizing an interagency task force on psychological resilience in law enforcement. Chief Reyes will be leading it. Perhaps Treasury would like to send representatives." The suggestion caught Maria off guard. A task force meant her influence would extend far beyond the FBI, potentially reshaping how federal agents across the country approach the psychological aspects of their work. Later, alone with Wallace in her office, Maria voiced her concerns. "Sir, this is expanding far beyond what I initially developed. I'm not sure I'm the right person to lead something this extensive." Wallace's expression was thoughtful. "Do you know why I pushed for your promotion to Unit Chief, Reyes? I assumed it was because of the success of the Sterling operation. No, it was because of what you did after. Most agents who endure what you did, months of harassment, demeaning treatment, isolation, they either become hardened or they break. You did neither. Instead, you transformed that experience into a methodology that helps others maintain their humanity in inhuman situations." He paused. "That's rare, Reyes. Rarer than you might think." That evening, Maria found herself in her apartment, staring at her mother's photo. The simple house cleaner who had taught her that dignity came from within, not from how others treated you. Who had shown her that being invisible could be a form of power if you chose it rather than having it forced upon you. She wondered what her mother would think of this new responsibility, shaping how federal agents across multiple agencies maintained their humanity while doing necessary but difficult work. Her phone rang. Emily calling with news from the day's training sessions. But instead of the expected training update, Emily's voice was urgent. "Maria, you need to turn on the news, now." Maria switched on her television to find breaking news about Sterling Corporate. The headline made her freeze. Former Sterling executive commits suicide after new allegations. The news anchor's voice filled her living room. Bradley Morrison, former junior executive at Sterling Corporate and key witness in the ongoing fraud case, was found dead in his apartment this morning. Sources close to the investigation suggest Morrison was facing new allegations of evidence tampering and had recently received threats. Authorities are investigating whether his death is connected to the upcoming trial of former director Richard Bailey. Maria's mind raced. Morrison had been cooperating with the investigation, providing crucial testimony about Bailey's operations. His sudden death weeks before Bailey's trial couldn't be coincidence. Her phone buzzed again, this time assistant. Director Pearson. "Reyes, I need you at headquarters immediately. The Morrison situation has implications for our entire case." The emergency meeting included prosecutors, FBI leadership, and the case agents who had been building the case against Bailey. The mood was somber as they reviewed the preliminary findings of Morrison's death. "The medical examiner is ruling it a suicide," explained Senior Agent Wilson. "But there are inconsistencies. The timing is suspicious. 3 weeks before he was scheduled to provide key testimony. And we've confirmed he received threatening messages from an untraceable number." Pearson turned to Maria. "You had direct contact with Morrison during and after the Sterling operation. What's your assessment?" Maria considered carefully. Morrison was remorseful about his role at Sterling. He seemed genuinely committed to making amends. But he was also deeply afraid of Bailey's connections. He mentioned several times that Bailey had friends in places that matter. Could he have been compromised? Wallace asked. Pressured to tamper with evidence before taking his own life? "It's possible," Maria acknowledged. "But something doesn't fit. Morrison wasn't just cooperating. He was eager to rebuild his life. He'd enrolled in ethics courses, was volunteering with financial literacy programs. That doesn't align with someone planning to sabotage a case and then commit suicide." Pearson nodded. "I agree. Which is why we're reopening the investigation into Bailey's network. We believe there may be connections we missed, possibly extending into law enforcement." The implication hung heavy in the room. If Bailey had connections within federal agencies, it would explain how he'd remained untouchable for so long before Maria's operation. "We need someone who understands Bailey's operation from the inside," Pearson continued. "Someone who observed him directly, who might recognize patterns we've missed." All eyes turned to Maria. "You want me to review the case?" she asked. "No," Wallace said quietly. "We want you to lead a covert task force investigating potential law enforcement corruption connected to Bailey. Your experience at Sterling, combined with your psychological insight, makes you uniquely qualified." Maria felt a familiar tension, the pull between her administrative role-shaping training and her field experience. "What about Project Perspective, the interagency training program?" "It will continue under Patterson's supervision," Pearson assured her. "But this takes priority. If Bailey has corrupted officials within our agencies, we need to know before his trial begins." 3 days later, Maria found herself in a secure facility with a hand-picked team of agents, analysts, and forensic accountants. The walls were covered with financial records, communication logs, and photographs connecting Sterling executives to various officials. Emily had been assigned as her second in command, bringing both her administrative skills and her perspective. As someone who had witnessed the Sterling operation firsthand, "Morrison's financial records show something interesting," Emily explained, pointing to a display. 3 large deposits in the weeks before his death, followed by transfers to offshore accounts we haven't been able to trace. Blackmail payments? Suggested financial analyst Lucas Rivera. Possibly, Maria said. But why transfer the money out if he was planning to kill himself? And who was the ultimate recipient? The team worked tirelessly, mapping connections between Sterling's operations and various regulatory bodies that should have caught their illegal activities years earlier. Patterns began to emerge. Cases mysteriously closed, investigations redirected, evidence lost. Late one evening, as most of the team had gone home, Maria and Emily remained, reviewing interview transcripts from Sterling employees. "There's something here we're missing," Maria murmured, staring at the wall of evidence. Bailey wasn't just evading regulation. He was operating with confidence that he wouldn't be caught. Emily studied a particular photograph. Bailey at a charity gala standing next to several prominent figures, including federal officials. What if it wasn't just regulatory capture? What if he had active protection? Maria followed her gaze to the photo, and something clicked. Standing slightly behind Bailey was a familiar face, Thomas Reynolds, Diana Reynolds' ex-husband and a senior official at the SEC. Emily, pull Reynolds' financial records and case history. The investigation took a dramatic turn. Thomas. Reynolds had overseen multiple investigations that should have flagged Sterling's activities, but had instead been closed without action. His financial records showed no direct payments from Bailey, but his lifestyle far exceeded his government. Salary. "We need to bring this to Director Wallace," Maria decided. This connection to Agent Reynolds' ex-husband complicates things significantly. Wallace listened gravely as Maria presented their findings. "This is delicate, Reyes. Reynolds is one of our most respected agents. If her ex-husband is involved, she needs to know," Maria insisted. "Not just for the case, but for her own protection. If Bailey is eliminating witnesses and has connections this high up, everyone associated with the Sterling case could be at risk." The meeting with Diana Reynolds was tense. She listened silently as Maria outlined the evidence connecting her ex-husband to Bailey's operation. "Thomas and I have been divorced for 5 years, she said finally. "But I won't pretend. This doesn't concern me. If Bailey could compromise someone at the SIC, who else might be involved?" The question launched a widened investigation, with increased security for everyone connected to the Sterling case. Maria found herself once again at the center of a complex operation, but this time not as an undercover agent, but as the leader coordinating multiple teams across agencies. 2 weeks of intensive investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Bailey had methodically built relationships with officials across multiple regulatory bodies, using a combination of blackmail, bribery, and professional manipulation. The corruption wasn't just about money. It was about power and influence, carefully cultivated over decades. The night before they were scheduled to present their findings to a special prosecutor, Maria received an encrypted message on her secure phone. "Parking garage. Level B2, alone. Information about Morrison." Everything about the message screamed trap, but it also might be their only chance to understand what had really happened to Morrison. After consulting with Wallace and establishing a surveillance team, Maria agreed to the meeting with extensive backup in place. The parking garage was dimly lit, with concrete pillars creating shadows perfect for concealment. Maria moved carefully, her training keeping her alert to any movement or sound. "Agent Reyes." The voice came from behind a pillar. A figure stepped into the faint light, Thomas Reynolds, looking haggard and afraid. "I didn't kill Morrison," he said without preamble, "but I know who did. Bailey has people inside the Bureau itself. Morrison discovered it and was going to tell you. That's why they silenced him." "Who?" Maria demanded, her hand near her weapon. "I can't just tell you. They're watching me too, but I brought evidence." He held up a flash drive. "Everything you need is here. Names, accounts, communications, Bailey's entire protection network. As Reynolds extended his hand with the drive, a shot rang out. Reynolds crumpled to the ground, the drive clattering across the concrete. Maria drew her weapon, taking cover as her backup team rushed in. In the chaos that followed, the shooter escaped, but Reynolds survived with a shoulder wound. The flash. Drive contained exactly what he'd promised: detailed evidence of a network of corrupted officials, including 2 within the FBI itself. The case broke wide open. Bailey, already in custody awaiting trial for financial crimes, now faced additional charges of conspiracy and ordering Morrison's murder. The corrupted officials were arrested in coordinated raids, sending shockwaves through federal agencies. A month later, Maria stood in Director Wallace's office, delivering her final report on the corruption investigation. "Exceptional work, Unit Chief Reyes," Wallace said, closing the file. "You've uncovered corruption that might have remained hidden for years. The Attorney General specifically mentioned your leadership in this case." Maria nodded, acknowledging the praise but feeling the weight of what they discovered. "Sir, this case revealed vulnerabilities in how we vet and monitor our own people. The psychological profiles of the corrupted officials showed common patterns we should have recognized." "Which brings me to your next assignment," Wallace replied. "With the corruption case concluded, it's time to return to Project Perspective, but with an expanded focus." He handed her a new folder. "The director has authorized the creation of the Integrity and Resilience Division, with you as its head. Your mandate goes beyond training. You'll be developing new protocols for psychological vetting, ongoing assessment, and early intervention when agents show vulnerability to compromise." The scope was unprecedented, not just training agents to maintain their psychological health, but creating systems to protect the integrity of federal law enforcement itself. "This is a direct result of your work, Reyes. From Sterling Corporate to this corruption case, you've demonstrated not just investigative skill, but a fundamental understanding of human psychology and institutional vulnerability." As Maria left Wallace's office, she found Emily waiting for her, a knowing smile on her face. "You've seen the new assignment?" Maria asked. Emily nodded. "Division Chief Reyes. It has a nice ring to it." "There's a place for you in the new division," Maria offered. "Assistant Division Chief, if you're interested." "I wouldn't miss it. Someone has to keep you from working 20-hour days." As they walked through headquarters, agents nodded. Respectfully. Maria was no longer the invisible cleaning lady, or even just the undercover specialist. She had become something more, a leader, whose unique perspective had transformed how the Bureau understood both psychological resilience and institutional integrity. That evening, in her apartment, Maria added a new photograph beside her mother's. The official opening of the Integrity and Resilience Division, with her team gathered around her. From cleaning toilets at Sterling Corporate to heading a division at FBI headquarters, a journey that would have seemed impossible just 18 months earlier. Her phone rang. Assistant Director Pearson with news that Bailey had accepted a plea deal, agreeing to provide evidence against his entire network in exchange for considerations in sentencing. "He specifically asked about you," Pearson added. "Wanted to know if you were really a trained agent or if you'd been recruited because of your cleaning background." Maria laughed. "What did you tell him?" "That you were one of our most decorated agents long before you ever picked up a toilet brush." His face was priceless. After the call, Maria sat at her window, watching the city lights. The daughter of a house cleaner had risen to help clean corruption from the highest levels of government. Her mother would have appreciated the symmetry. The journey hadn't been easy. She'd endured humiliation, danger, and the psychological strain of maintaining a cover identity for months. But those experiences had forged something valuable, a methodology that would now protect other agents and the institutions they served. Excellence didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be ready when called upon. And Maria Reyes, once dismissed as just a cleaning lady, had answered that call in ways no one could have predicted, not with a weapon or a badge, but with insight into the human condition that transformed how federal agents maintained both their effectiveness and their humanity. 2 years had passed since the Sterling corporate case, and the J. Edgar Hoover building hummed with activity on a crisp autumn morning. Division Chief Maria Reyes stood at the window of her corner office, watching new recruits file into the building below. Today marked the graduation of the first class to complete the Comprehensive Integrity and Resilience program, a milestone that represented the culmination of her vision. Her office bore little resemblance to the maintenance closet at Sterling, where she'd once hidden her surveillance equipment. Awards lined one wall, including the Director's Medal for Exceptional Service. Framed photographs documented her journey. Her mother at her FBI Academy graduation, her undercover team after the Sterling operation, the formation of her division. Each image captured a chapter in her remarkable ascent from the daughter of a house cleaner to one of the Bureau's most influential leaders. A knock at the door interrupted her reflection. Assistant Division Chief Emily Patterson entered, carrying a tablet and a concerned expression. The director's office called. They've moved up the congressional testimony to tomorrow morning. Maria nodded, unsurprised. They want to catch us unprepared. Classic intimidation tactic. Tomorrow she would testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee about the Bureau's new approach to psychological resilience and integrity testing. Controversial methods that had exposed 12 more corrupted agents across 3 federal agencies in the past year alone. Are you worried? Emily asked, setting down the tablet with the updated schedule. Maria smiled. I spent 6 months cleaning toilets while being mocked by millionaires. A few hours with senators doesn't intimidate me. But her light-hearted response masked genuine concern. The integrity protocols she'd developed were facing significant resistance from within the law enforcement community. Many viewed psychological assessment as intrusive, unnecessary, a sign of institutional distrust rather than strengthening. The opposition's growing more organized, Emily reported, pulling up a news article. Former Deputy Director Callahan gave an interview calling our methods Orwellian and destructive to agent morale. Callahan retired before the Bailey corruption case, Maria noted. He never saw how psychological blind spots nearly compromised the entire operation. As they reviewed the testimony preparation, Maria's secure phone buzzed. Assistant Director Pearson requesting her immediate presence in the director's office. The urgency in the message suggested something beyond routine preparation for tomorrow's testimony. Director Samuel Chun, the first Asian American to lead the FBI, greeted Maria with characteristic directness. Chief Reyes, we have a situation. The wall screen displayed surveillance photos of a familiar face, Richard Bailey, the former Sterling corporate director whose criminal empire Maria had dismantled. Bailey was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide. Maria felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. There's nothing apparent about it. Bailey wouldn't kill himself. He was still negotiating his sentence reduction. Exactly. Chun agreed grimly. Preliminary investigation suggests it wasn't suicide at all. The timing is suspicious. 3 days before he was scheduled to provide testimony that would have implicated several high-level officials we haven't yet identified. The implications were clear. Despite their efforts, Bailey's network of corruption extended further than they'd uncovered, reaching high enough to eliminate him inside a maximum security federal prison. We believe there's a connection to your testimony tomorrow, Pearson added. Bailey's death removes a key witness supporting the necessity of your integrity protocols. Without his cooperation, the evidence of institutional vulnerability becomes significantly weaker. Maria studied the surveillance photos, noting details others might miss. Have the forensics teams checked for evidence of forced injection? Yes, Chun confirmed. Preliminary toxicology found a paralytic agent, that wouldn't appear in standard screening. Someone wanted this to look like suicide while ensuring Bailey couldn't fight back. Who had access to his cell block? That's where this gets complicated, Pearson said, pressing a button to display a new set of images. Security footage shows guard rotations were normal, but there's an 18-minute gap in coverage, a technical glitch, according to the prison administration. Shun leaned forward. We need you to adjust your testimony strategy. Reyes, Bailey's death isn't just a loose end from an old case. It's evidence that the corruption extends further than we've admitted publicly. The integrity protocols aren't just theoretical. Improvement, they're an urgent necessity. As Maria left the director's office, her mind raced with implications. Bailey's murder suggested a level of infiltration that threatened the foundation of federal law enforcement itself. Her testimony wasn't just about defending a new program anymore. It was about exposing a threat most Americans couldn't imagine existed. Back in her office, she found her team assembled. Emily had sensed the urgency and gathered their core leadership. Special Agent Derek Hernandez, who'd become her operations specialist. Dr. Sofia Martinez, their psychological assessment expert. And Lucas Rivera, who developed their financial forensics methodology. Bailey's dead, Maria announced without preamble. Murdered in federal custody, made to look like suicide. The team absorbed this news with professional calm, but Maria could read their micro-expressions, concern, determination, and a hint of fear. They understood what this meant. We need to rebuild our testimony approach, she continued. This isn't just about defending our methods anymore. We need to demonstrate that the threat is active and immediate. For the next 6 hours they reconstructed their presentation, incorporating the emerging evidence from Bailey's death without compromising the ongoing investigation. Maria insisted on transparency with the committee. The American people deserved to know that corruption had penetrated institutions they trusted with their safety. As evening fell, Emily found Maria alone in the conference room, reviewing photographs from the Sterling operation, Bailey in his element, arrogantly dismissing her as she cleaned his executive bathroom. You look like you're searching for something, Emily observed. I'm trying to understand what I missed, Maria admitted. Bailey treated me like I was invisible, but he was careful around everyone else. He knew how to identify threats, how to neutralize them. He wouldn't have missed signs of betrayal from his own network unless the betrayal came from someone he never considered a threat, Emily finished. Exactly, someone invisible. Someone like... Maria's eyes widened as a connection formed. She quickly pulled up personnel files from the prison where Bailey had been held, scanning staff photos until she found what she was looking for. The night shift janitor, she breathed. Look at his employment history. The man had begun working at the prison just 2 weeks after Bailey's incarceration. His background check was impeccable, too impeccable. The pattern was familiar because Maria had established a similar cover at Sterling. Someone had learned from her methods and applied them in reverse, not to expose corruption, but to eliminate witnesses to it. Get Hernandez and a tactical team, Maria ordered, and alert the prison administration without revealing what we suspect. If this janitor realizes we've identified him, he'll disappear. Within the hour, a joint FBI-US Marshals operation apprehended the suspect as he arrived for his shift. Under interrogation, he revealed connections to a network extending into multiple agencies, a shadow structure that had protected certain financial interests for decades. The implications transformed Maria's congressional testimony from a defensive justification into a powerful call to action. When she entered the hearing room the next morning, the atmosphere was charged with tension. News of Bailey's death had broken overnight, raising questions about federal prison security and the true extent of corruption within law enforcement. Senator Eleanor Graves, the committee chairwoman, opened with unexpected directness. Division Chief Reyes, recent events have cast your integrity protocols in a new light. Would you say Bailey's death vindicates your concerns about institutional vulnerability? Maria paused, aware that cameras were broadcasting her testimony nationwide. Senator, I wouldn't use the word vindicates. There's no satisfaction in being proven right about a threat of this magnitude. What happened to Richard Bailey, his murder inside a supposedly secure federal facility, demonstrates that the corruption we've been fighting extends further and reaches higher than most Americans would believe possible. For the next 2 hours, Maria methodically outlined the evidence, explaining how psychological vulnerability created openings for corruption, how traditional vetting failed to identify agents susceptible to compromise, and how her integrity protocols had already prevented several infiltration attempts. The methods developed by my division aren't about policing thoughts or imposing ideology, she explained. They're about recognizing that law enforcement officers are human beings subject to the same psychological pressures, financial temptations, and emotional vulnerabilities as anyone else. The difference is that when those vulnerabilities are exploited in law enforcement, the consequences affect national security and public trust. Senator James Wilson, a vocal critic of enhanced vetting, leaned forward. Chief Reyes, your personal history with the Sterling case is well documented. Some might suggest your methods are colored by that experience, that you're seeing potential betrayal everywhere because of what you witnessed in that operation. The question was designed to paint her as traumatized, unreliable, emotionally compromised. 5 years earlier, it might have worked. But Maria had long since integrated those experiences into her professional identity. Senator, my experiences at Sterling Corporate didn't distort my perspective, they clarified it. I spent months being underestimated, dismissed, treated as invisible because of the role I played. That experience taught me to recognize how our assumptions about people, based on their position, appearance, or background, create blind spots that can be exploited. She gestured to the evidence displays. The janitor who killed Bailey wasn't caught by background checks or surveillance cameras. He was identified because we recognized the pattern, someone hiding in plain sight, using others' assumptions about service workers to move undetected. I recognized it because I'd used the same technique to expose Sterling's crimes. Her testimony shifted the conversation. By the session's end, even critics acknowledged the compelling evidence. The committee voted unanimously to expand funding for the Integrity and Resilience Division, with a mandate to implement protocols across all federal law enforcement agencies. As Maria left the Capitol, reporters swarmed with questions about her background, her rise from undercover agent to division chief, the cleaning lady who cleaned up the FBI. She answered briefly, redirecting attention to the program rather than herself. Before sliding into the waiting bureau vehicle, Emily sat inside, monitoring news coverage on her tablet. You're trending nationwide. From cleaning toilets to cleaning corruption is the headline on 3 major networks. Maria shook her head, uncomfortable with the personalization of what should be an institutional achievement. The program matters, not my story. Your story is what makes people believe in the program, Emily countered. You're living proof that appearances deceive, that power hides corruption, and that sometimes the person with the cleaning cart is the most dangerous person in the room. Back at headquarters, Maria found her division buzzing with energy. The testimony had galvanized support, and requests for training were pouring in from agencies across the government. Director Chun waited in her office, a rare personal visit. That signaled the importance of the moment. Exceptional work, Reyes, he said without preamble. The President called personally after your testimony. The Attorney General wants your protocols implemented justice-wide within 6 months. The validation should have felt triumphant. Instead, Maria felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. Sir, rapid expansion concerns me. These methods require careful implementation, proper training. If rushed, they could become performative. rather than substantive. Chun nodded, unsurprised by her caution. Which is why the expansion will happen under your direct supervision. The President is creating a new position, Executive Director of Federal Law Enforcement Integrity. He wants you for the role. The offer was stunning, a position that would place Maria among the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the country, with authority across multiple agencies. A cleaning lady's daughter elevated to unprecedented influence. This would mean leaving the bureau? She asked, already calculating the implications. Technically, yes. But you'd maintain oversight of the division you've built here, while extending its methodology government-wide. Chun studied her face. This isn't just recognition of your work, Reyes. It's acknowledgement that the threat you've identified requires coordinated response at the highest levels. That evening, Maria drove to a small cemetery on the outskirts of Baltimore. Her mother's grave was simple, a modest headstone with her name, dates, and the words, "She taught dignity through service." Maria placed fresh flowers before sitting on the bench nearby. "I wish you could see this, Mom," she said quietly. "Everything you taught me while cleaning those houses, about observing carefully, about maintaining dignity regardless of how people treated you, about finding power in being underestimated, it's all become something larger than either of us could have imagined." The autumn leaves rustled around her as she considered Chun's offer. The new position would mean greater influence, but also greater visibility. No more hiding in plain sight. No more using anonymity as a tool. She would become a public figure, her story dissected by media, her methods scrutinized by critics and supporters alike. Her phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Just heard about the President's offer. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." The loyalty touched her deeply. Emily had been there from the beginning, one of the few who'd seen through the cleaning lady disguise to recognize the capable agent beneath. Their partnership had evolved into friendship, then into a professional bond that strengthened them both. As twilight settled over the cemetery, Maria made her decision. She would accept the position, not for the prestige or power, but because it offered the opportunity to transform how integrity was understood and protected throughout law enforcement. The cleaning lady who'd been mocked and dismissed would now help clean corruption from the highest levels of government. 6 months later, Maria stood at a podium in the White House Rose Garden as the President introduced her as the first Executive Director of Federal Law Enforcement Integrity. Cameras flashed, capturing the historic moment as she stepped forward to address the nation. "Integrity isn't just about following rules or passing background checks," she began. "It's about maintaining our core values even when under pressure. Even when no one is watching. Even when taking the easier path might benefit us personally. True integrity requires both institutional safeguards and personal commitment." She spoke without notes, drawing on experiences that had shaped her understanding, from watching her mother maintain dignity while being treated as invisible, through her months undercover at Sterling, to the complex corruption cases she'd helped unravel. The methods we're implementing today grew from a simple observation that our greatest vulnerabilities often hide in our assumptions about who matters and who doesn't. When we dismiss people based on their job, appearance, or background, we create blind spots that can be exploited. But when we recognize the humanity and potential in every person, regardless of position, we strengthen not just our institutions, but our society. In the audience, Emily sat alongside Agent Hernandez, Dr. Martinez, and the core team that had built the Integrity Division from concept to reality. Behind them were rows of agents who'd completed the program, including several who'd initially been skeptical but now served as its strongest advocates. In the back row, barely noticeable among government officials and media representatives, sat a group of service workers, janitors, maintenance staff, cafeteria workers from federal buildings across Washington. Maria had personally insisted on their invitation, a symbolic acknowledgement that integrity and observation happened at every level of an organization. As she concluded her remarks, Maria directly addressed these often invisible workers. To those who clean our buildings, maintain our facilities, and provide services often taken for granted, you see and hear more than most realize. Your perspective matters. Your observations matter, and your integrity matters. The moment wasn't just about personal vindication for a former undercover agent who'd endured months of disrespect. It represented a fundamental shift in how federal agencies understood security and integrity, acknowledging that vulnerability often came not from dramatic external threats, but from the slow erosion of values within. After the ceremony, as officials and media dispersed, Maria made a point of speaking personally with each of the service workers who'd attended. She listened to their experiences, their observations, their insights about the agencies where they worked. Several shared stories of witnessing concerning behavior, but feeling powerless to report it. Exactly the vulnerability her new systems were designed to address. Later, alone with Emily in her new office at the Justice Department, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. When I was scrubbing Bailey's executive bathroom, listening to him plot financial crimes while treating me like furniture, I never imagined it would lead to this. Emily smiled. I think that's what makes your approach so powerful. You understand both sides, what it means to be invisible and what it means to have authority. Most people only experience one or the other. My mother understood both, Maria said quietly. She cleaned houses for wealthy families who never really saw her, but she maintained absolute authority over her own dignity. She never let their treatment define her worth. The intercom buzzed, the Attorney General requesting Maria's presence for the first meeting of the Federal Integrity Task Force. As she gathered her materials, she paused at the framed photograph of her mother that now held a place of honor on her desk. You know what my mother used to say about cleaning? She asked Emily. That a good cleaner doesn't just remove visible dirt, they address the sources of contamination that most people never notice. Emily nodded, understanding the metaphor. That's exactly what your programs do. Address the sources of corruption that traditional methods miss. As they walked to the conference room where agency heads awaited her guidance, Maria reflected on how far she'd come from the daughter of a house cleaner to the architect of a new approach to institutional integrity. The journey had required her to be both seen and unseen, to use invisibility as a tool and visibility as a platform, to clean toilets and clean corruption with equal dedication. The cleaning lady who'd planted listening devices had become the leader who planted the seeds of transformation throughout federal law enforcement. Her methods, born from being underestimated, would ensure that future corrupting influencers would find no such blind spots to exploit. Excellence didn't need to announce itself. It simply needed to be ready when called upon. And Maria Reyes, once dismissed as just the cleaning lady, had answered that call in ways that would reshape institutions for generations to come. For the service workers still moving invisibly through the corridors of power, she had become something more than a success story. She had become proof that being underestimated could be a source of strength, that dignity came from within rather than from position, and that sometimes the most powerful person in the room was the one everyone else failed to see. The legacy of a house cleaner's wisdom had transformed into a national movement for integrity. And somewhere, Maria liked to think, her mother was smiling at the symmetry of it all, that her daughter had risen to such heights, not despite starting with a cleaning cart, but because of the profound lessons learned while pushing one. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.